Hello there, welcome along to the Canterbury campus here at the University of Kent. Today we're talking about the School of Architecture and Planning, and we're going to be giving you a bit more of an idea about what you can expect if you choose to come here. So during the next hour or so we'll have a couple of presentations from lecturers. We'll also have some questions and answers from them as well as students as well. So please don't hesitate to get your questions in throughout the programme, and we'll do our very best to get those answered for you. Right, let's get underway, shall we? And introduce our first presentation of the morning, and it's Dr. Timothy Brittain-Catlin, who's going to give you a bit more detail about what you can expect on the course.
Thank you very much, Kieran, and a very warm welcome to everybody joining us this morning. We're located in our newly re-equipped digital space, which you can see on the screen. This is the centre of life at the school, where many of our activities take place. Now, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how the school works, what it offers, and why you should be looking to come to join us if you're interested in anything connected with the architectural world. We are an architecture school. That's to say, if you want to qualify as an architect, we're a place to come to, but there's plenty more that you can do here, and plenty of opportunities for employment across a whole range of fields that are related to design and to building, to interior design, to landscape architecture and so on. And I want to take you through those part by part in order to see how we work and what to expect, and also what we'd be expecting from you if you decided to apply to us. So let me start by a word or two about how qualifying as an architect in Britain works. Many of our applicants intend to join us to become architects at the end of the day, even if, as things work out, they might go off on a different direction. It's not unusual. We're very happy to accept people who want to take an architectural route on the way to something else. But let me show you what happens if you want to commit to the full path. You might have heard about architecture as a very long period of study, and it is, but it's varied. It's broken up into different forms, and there are a lot of different experiences, including employment experiences, along the way to make it more fun and more rewarding. Now, to become an architect, you need to have a qualification that's approved by two organisations. You can see their logos here. The first one is the Architects Registration Board, and that's the government agency which approves the standard of education in this country. The second logo, it might possibly be a bit more familiar if you've looked up architectural matters on the web. This is the RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architects, and that's the Association of Professional Architects, which is involved with education, but it's also involved with the cultural life of architects in general, with a library, with lectures, with events, and many other events of different kinds. For example, at the moment, we're seeing on the television the RIBA House of the Year Award, and that's a central part of the life of the Institute. Now, the way in which you qualify as an architect is like this. You do what we call here the Part 1. The Part 1 is a 3-year course. In that respect, it's exactly the same as every other university course. It means a programme which, as you'll see later on this morning, consists of a variety of different activities, from designing and making to cultural studies and technical studies of different sorts. After qualifying as an architect, you take a job which is called, in the jargon of architects, if you've come across these things, a Part 1 architectural assistant. You do a year out. It means you work out in the profession as an assistant on architectural projects. You do real work in a real place, and you keep a record of it. Now, if you decide after that to come back and continue to study as an architect, you do what is called the Part 2. And the Part 2 is a further pair of graduate years of architectural study, where it's not like returning to being 18 again. You do more sophisticated tasks, and you take on the kind of exciting and more conceptual type of project that you might not have had time for the first time round. So it's a way of enriching your knowledge of the world as an architectural professional. Finally, you do the year out, and the year out is very similar to the first one, but generally at this stage you take on a more responsible position within an office. Now, that's year 7, but what you need to do then in order to qualify as an architect is the Part 3, and the Part 3 is simply a professional training program which every professional architect needs to take after they've worked out in practice for 24 months. So it is a long path, but it's a varied one, and I'm going to show you now different ways in which you might branch off from it in order to fulfill your ambitions. Here's a list of the kind of occupations that people often do once they've got a first degree a BA Honours degree in architecture. Top of the list there is the BA, the Part 1 architectural assistant. That's the architectural professional route, as it were, that I've just been describing. But you might become an architectural technologist with a speciality in, for example, an environmental aspect of architectural design. You could become an interior designer. You might become an urban designer or an urban master planner. There's a great deal of interest in architectural visualization. You'll know about that from games that you play, for example. We here offer a graduate program in architectural visualization that's been very popular and very successful. You could become a landscape architect, and finally, you could become an architectural journalist. In fact, if you read stories by many of the architectural journalists in the national newspapers, you often discover that they did at least a Part 1 architecture BA Honours degree themselves. So that's a fairly standard route to progress if you want to write about architecture or about architectural history or architectural culture in Britain or worldwide. I mentioned earlier that we're sitting in our newly re-equipped studio space. We have much else to commend us. We are ranked 12th in the UK by the Times Good University Guide for 2019. We have high ranking for graduate prospects. Many of the people who teach in this school have strong links within the profession. Our recent research excellence framework scoring, now that might not mean much to anyone in particular, but what it means is how good is the quality of the research done by the staff. We were ranked the same as Cambridge the last time that it was mentioned. The Kent School of Architecture and Planning site is one of the few, is within the university, which is one of the few to have received the gold ranking in the TEF, that's the National Government Standards in University Teaching. So it's a very high rating, and this university as a whole takes the quality of teaching extremely seriously. Now, we have, in addition to members of staff who teach architectural design, we have those who specialize in different areas. They're researchers in heritage and conservation, in the many sustainable aspects of architectural and building design, in urban master planning, in visualization, in urban planning and resilience, and in biodigital architecture. So we offer a lot of varied routes with a lot of experts, and certainly if I had one single piece of advice to offer to anyone who joins us as a student, find out who the members of staff are who share your interests and see how much you can find to make your career path a more rewarding one along the way. I'm going to say a little bit extra about our digital architecture and the experts here in the school. We recently appointed a director of digital architecture, Dr. Tim Ireland, and he's established a new research centre which is called DARC. Its work involves researching the uses of digital design, and this is something which we see across the whole of the school. So you don't have to be a graduate expert or researcher yourself. You can get right into it. We have excellent equipment. We've been involved in this from its early days. So we have digital fabrication resources. We've had 3D scanners and plastic resin and 3D printers for a very long time now. We are at the state of the art in this increasingly important aspect of architecture, which applies to historic building restoration just as much as it applies to modern architectural design. We're also offering a new graduate program of MSc in biodigital architecture. We're located right at the centre of the University of Kent campus, up on the hill. You can see from the image here that this is a very green site. It's a very pleasant site. It's a 20-minute walk into town. If that's your thing, you can get on a train and be in London an hour later, so it's extremely well connected, but we're far enough away from London for it to be green and pleasant and quiet. We've heard over the years that many of our graduates have said that the location of the university is terrific as a way of enhancing the experience of being a student. It's calming, it's pleasant, there's plenty of places to eat and lots of things to do. The library, the university library, which has been recently enlarged very substantially with a great deal of resources and new digital resources, is located next to us. It's just to the right-hand side of that pink triangle that you can see there. and you can see there's just a long walk down to the station about 20 minutes away down the hill to your left. So it's a fabulous place to be. The city is a very safe city, it's a clean city, it's a very pleasant place to live, and we often hear enthusiastic responses from our graduates about what it's like to be here. Now, let me move on to the university's entry requirements, and I'd like to say right away that these might vary according to your particular situation. We welcome applicants at any stage of life and with any particular background. We've admitted students with fantastic success, for example, from the building trades in the past, so there is no need necessarily to follow the standard pattern, but I would imagine that probably most of you watching are interested in how it generally works. So here's a list. The first one is to say we'd expect an ABB from 3 A-levels or equivalent, 34 points overall or 16 at HL in the International Baccalaureate, including 4 in maths, a DDD in BTEC Level 3 extended diploma. Of course, the situation will be different if you're an applicant from outside the United Kingdom. Always ask and always let us know if you have any particular question about the route you might be following. If you've been studying for an art qualification, we'd expect a grade B or above. For maths and English at GCSE, you'd need a grade C or equivalent. Now, all applicants must submit a portfolio as part of their applications, and I'm going to say a little bit more about that subject because it's a very important part of the application process. But there will be, as there always is, a personal statement in which you should mention any work experience that you've done, any project that you've been part of, any interests and extracurricular activities. And of course, we're always interested to hear if those include architectural visits or drawing or reading or any of those type of things. So we can have a kind of conversation with you across your application. Now, the portfolio advice is available on our website. We've written a simple list here, but I'm going to say a bit more about it. And in addition to that, I'm going to say a little bit also about some of about some examples which I'm going to show you, so you can get a picture of it, because it might not be like anything that you've necessarily done before, unless you've done Art A-level. The portfolio can be composed of works in any medium that you happen to want to use. In fact, a variety of media is a good thing for us, even if you're less good at some things than at others, because one of the things that we're looking for is a willingness to experiment with different ways of recording your experience of the world around you. So this, of course, might include sketches, paintings, ceramics, textiles, photography, and so on. I'd be very interested myself in seeing examples of models, because we put a great deal of emphasis at the school here on model making. Any kind of three-dimensional design is enormously important, of course, for architects all the way through. So if you can take photographs of models you've made, or models of buildings, for example, that you've made, then it's going to interest us here. We're interested in seeing that you've made a special effort to take in the architectural environment around you. So that often means going to look at buildings. They might just be what seem to you perhaps like ordinary buildings in the area where you live. We're not looking for St. Paul's Cathedral every time. We'd like to see evidence that you've gone out, you've found out about buildings, you've made models of them, you've taken photographs of them, you've perhaps made a watercolour of them, large scale, small scale, all those things. We're looking for observational skills. Can you render a scene realistically, for example? Life drawing is a very good experience for anyone applying for any of the three-dimensional skills that we're offering here. Still life drawing, urban, rural landscapes, and so on. Can you demonstrate your design process? That means, can we see how you worked your way through a design project from the beginning to the end? It's very interesting to see how ideas develop and what you do with them. It's a real test, not only of your commitment, but also it's a test of your interest, how far you can pursue an idea, how you can make a kind of, how you can describe maybe a story through drawing something in a series of different ways. Analysis of colour, form, spacing, using a variety of mediums. This is what we're looking for. Ask us for advice if it's not clear, but I hope you're getting a picture that what we're looking for is a variety of attempts to capture your experience, and the more skill and effort you put into it, the more we're going to be interested in seeing it. We've got some examples here of the type of work that we've often seen in portfolios. We've got some good ones. You can see here a fairly realistic rendering of a building at the bottom left, for example, it's possible to teach yourself easily how to draw perspective before you come. Then you've got one technical skill already in hand. These things are not actually that difficult for anyone who's got an interest in them. They're technical abilities. You can find help online, how to draw perspectives, how to colour in pencil drawings and so on, and get yourself into a strong position. But there you can see on the top right a completely different scale of operation. There's very fine drawings of a collection of shells, so no one is expecting you to travel a long distance to be able to get a suitable subject if you're drawing. Watercolours on the top left, and a scene, an urban scene on the bottom right. A couple more sheets of these before we move over to the next stage. There you can see on the left-hand side two very different ways of capturing buildings. One is a kind of experience of being within a courtyard, whereas the other one is a fine measured drawing in pencil showing precision and accuracy. You can see also it's an example of scale, isn't it? Because you can see the chair and you can see the arch behind it and you know how big everything is. If you can demonstrate a strong sense of scale, you know how big things are, then you have one of the basic skills that's required for an architect, even before you've begun to develop your training in a program such as ours. My final page here has got a big variety of different types of images. We've included photography in this one, but also two examples of life drawing, a completely fantastical type of drawing on the top right, and then a still life on the bottom left. So you can see in all of these colour, shape, form, scale, an awareness of buildings, an awareness of how drawing or photographing a building expresses something different about what that building is ready to be like. And you can see also how you might lay out these sheets in order for us to look at them when we go through your application. Now, this is the point where I hand over to the next stage. So I hope that you'll stay with us for a bit longer and you'll join us later for a little more presentation from Chloe Street Tarbatt to my left. And in addition, we'll have an opportunity for some questions later on.
Okay, Dr. Timothy, thank you ever so much indeed for that. We've had a couple of questions come in actually, so if we just shoot you a couple,
of course,
just off the back of your presentation there. So for a degree that seems based a lot on practice and getting a route into the industry, just give us an idea of what sort of practical experiences students might be able to experience on the BA.
Once you're on the BA, there are a lot of practical experiences of different sorts. We take very seriously the business of going to see buildings in different places. They might be building sites, they might be completed schemes. To be in a group of people who share interests and to appreciate the architectural qualities, the planning, the materials, the location, those kind of things are a very important part of architecture. And what architecture school tutors will do is help you to find ways of understanding that information and taking it in. So going out and being there in the building is one aspect of the practical activities. But the practical activities here also involve making things, involve making, for example, shelters, real-sized objects which require a little technical skill. That's what we're here for, to help you with that. That's another technical aspect of it where we can offer a practical experience. And over the course of the 3 years here, you will come into contact with practicing architects of all kinds. Many of our design tutors across the 3 years of that part one of the BA Hons in architecture, they're practicing architects, they have real problems, they will engage their students in real questions about how to design buildings. So that's some of the things. Does that sound like it might answer your question?
Absolutely, and I'm sure if anyone does have any more, they'll be coming in. So don't hesitate to put your questions in throughout the rest of the programme. In a moment, we'll have our second presentation, but first, here's another little insight into what's on offer here at the Architecture School.
Through the whole year. And what you see here is the first 3 weeks of the year where they develop proposals based on Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities.
It describes a city called Zenobia, which are buildings on an arid landscape sitting on piles. So each building or each element is interconnected.
So initially I started off with a sketch of what I interpreted the city to be like. I'd done it on bamboo sticks because I thought that would create quite a dynamic composition and design. You have your own independent work, but then today it was sort of all our group would come together and we could also create the city as literally as everyone and create our final composition.
In the autumn term, we have a design project based in Margate, and in the spring term, we have they design a little exhibition centre that's based in the middle of Canterbury.
There's a real kind of focus on that creativity and fostering that, so that going into second and third year, you can really inject your personality into your work.
You can sort of just still continue to push boundaries, but you're always, held by a foundation of logic and good technical understanding.
Stage 1, we have running a design project, a technical project, and folio. And folio runs through the whole year. And what you see here is the first 3 weeks of the year where they develop proposals based on Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities.
It describes a city called Zenobia, which are buildings on an arid landscape sitting on piles. So each building or each element is interconnected.
So initially I started off with a sketch of what I interpreted the city to be like. I'd done it on bamboo sticks because I thought that would create quite a dynamic composition and design. You have your own independent work, but then today it was sort of all our group would come together and we could also create the city as literally as everyone and create our final composition.
In the autumn term, we have a design project based in Margate, and in the spring term we have they design a little exhibition centre that's based in the middle of Canterbury.
There's a real kind of focus on that creativity and fostering that, so that going into second and third year, you can really inject your personality into your work.
You can sort of just still continue to push boundaries, but you're always, held by a foundation of logic and good technical understanding.
And undergraduate programme director Chloe Street Tarbatt. Over to you guys.
Hi everybody, welcome to Kent School of Architecture in a virtual capacity. One small correction, because unfortunately Felicity Atepki couldn't make it today at the last minute, so we're joined by Rebecca Hobbs, who is our Stage 1 coordinator. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the BA programme, the overall BA programme. You'll see a chart on your screen, and it's organised quite simply across the 3 years. We have Stage 1. We name each of the years by stage. Stage 1, Stage 2 and Stage 3 down the left-hand side, and across the top we have the terms, and we do operate a term system as opposed to a semester system. So we have our autumn term, and your assessments will generally be at the end of that. Spring term similarly, and summer term is normally when we have our exams and final assessments. All of our modules are compulsory modules. Unlike many other programs in the university, we don't have any elective modules, but we do have small elective options within some of the modules, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. There are 18 modules in all across the BA. Stage 1 has the most modules with the least credits. So Stage 1 begins with folio, and folio is at the base of all of the teaching that we do here, because it's the fundamentals for how we learn to draw and communicate buildings, and that's pretty fundamental. Lots of our students arrive from all kinds of different subjects. They might be studying science, written subjects. Not everybody has done CDT or art necessarily. So we like to use Stage 1 to bring everybody up to speed in that respect. Stage 1 is not assessed formally. It doesn't qualify as part of your final degree assessment. So Stage 2 is 20% of your final degree, and Stage 3 is 80% of your final degree. So Stage 1 is very much a year of testing, experimenting, and having a bit of fun with Rebecca, which you'll find out a little more about. So this chart I think shows the clarity of our organisation across the 3 years. We've colour-coded it. So folio is yellow. Aside from folio, we have our the strips organised by colour, so that our red modules are our design modules, and our blue modules are our theory modules, and our green modules are our technical modules. Our technical modules oscillate between structures and construction and environment and sustainability and climate. Our theory modules begin with modern house, but then through the 3 years we stagger them chronologically. So it begins with ancient and medieval architecture, and we move on through Renaissance to neoclassicism, 19th century architecture, culminating in 20th century architecture. And these modules are all run by our in-house historians, of which we have many eminent historians on our staff panels. So then we also have our design modules, and we try and cover a wide range of different types of projects. So we start with a project which Rebecca Hobbs will tell us more about, Invisible Cities, which is very much an experimental project, just thinking about narrative and architecture. And then that culminates in a more focused study on designing a tiny house. And then we move on to design a small gallery, which is in the centre of Canterbury this year. In stage 2, we begin with a landscape module. So we still have a building element, but it's thinking about the relationship between landscape and building. And that's followed by our collective dwelling module, which is designing a small master plan for a housing scheme as part of a locality, and that's run by Timothy Brittain-Catlin. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. In stage 3, we bring into the picture both thinking about adapting, extending and retrofitting buildings, but we also look at urban design and master planning. So by the end of the 3 years, you've covered the full breadth of architectural design, from small-scale design in invisible cities and designing small houses, right through to the larger scale of master planning, public realm and urban design. And another USP we have at the University of Kent is our very strong theory base, and that culminates in our dissertation module. So we have an elective, we have an 8,000 word dissertation module and an elective as part of that, where students can decide instead to produce an artefact, in which case they produce a 4,000 word dissertation instead. And we'll come on to that a little later on. So Rebecca Hobbs is going to tell you a little bit more about stage 1.
Hi, I'm really sorry, I've got a really bad cold, so I hope you can hear me okay. So the first project that students do is part of the first module, assignment 1, and it's called Invisible Cities, which is named after a novel by Italo Calvino. He describes within that a series of different kinds of cities, kind of largely based on Venice. This particular city is called Zenobia, and within that there's a very eloquent description of a particular city sitting within a desert, sitting on piles with banners and flags and balconies, etc. So the students are given the text, and from the text they're asked to draw what they imagine that city to be like. And it's quite amazing how many students draw very different kinds of cities. It's a way of really showing how much the imagination plays within your design process. There's no right or wrong answer in this particular brief. So from that drawing, they take out one building and make some sketch models. From those sketch models, a more formal model is made, and the students take their models outside, plant their houses or interventions on bamboo sticks, and make a city outside, and that image on the right-hand side is that. And we've done that for the last 2 years, and it's a way of getting students to talk to each other, work together within groups, and also just get to grips with the basics of drawing and model making. The next slide, we're looking at modern house. In this module, students are asked to look at particular 20th and 21st century buildings. They're allocated a building, and they are asked to make an essay, write an essay, and also make a 1 to 100 scale model. This introduces them to the written element of the course, and there are a number of essays throughout the brief, and also get to grips with making scale models. So the workshop is really useful. The staff in the workshop are fantastic in assisting the students with this. Historically, we've asked the students to go on a field trip at Christmas, but this year in spring they went to Paris. So there's an image of the students sitting in Barcelona, actually, in this instance. So historically they've gone to Barcelona, but this year they went to Paris. We had a fantastic trip. Students were able to go to visit classical buildings, the Louvre, I.M. Pei's intervention in the Louvre, Corbusier buildings, Frank Gehry buildings. We also encourage them to sketch as they go along and visit galleries as well. So going to the Picasso Museum and so on. So following on from that, we introduced them to their first proper design module, which is called Building Design. We've identified a site within Canterbury, so we want students to be able to visit the site on a number of occasions, both in the morning, in the evening, and at different times of the day. They are asked to design this gallery really to encourage them to look at art to artists, both international and national, and local artists. So they're looking at artists who are based in Kent, historically and currently. So we're looking at Tracy Emin, J.W. Turner, Henry Moore, who used to live locally, and we get also his staff artists who are staff to identify key spaces within the gallery as well. So alongside that, they're looking at technology, understanding the structure of the building and construction of a building, together with environmental impact that has and issues around sustainability. They develop their drawing skills from the first term. They're developing their drawing skills and their model making skills, really learning how to communicate their ideas succinctly and beginning to look at how they present their work professionally. Alongside that, they're looking at ancient and medieval architecture. So, as Chloe said earlier, that's the kind of basis of their historical context. But the way that they're taught is really interesting, so that they've been given lectures about ancient medieval architecture, but really putting themselves in the place of the architects, the contemporary architects, so looking at how they were designing for that period of time. And that's really the end of the first year. So in the spring, that's in the spring term. In the summer term, students are asked to work on their portfolio. They have to submit a portfolio to be examined both by tutors and also external examiners. And to proceed to stage 2, they have to pass that portfolio, and they have to pass all the modules within stage 1 to proceed into stage 2. And the first module in stage 2 is architecture and landscape, and many students don't expect to think about landscape when they come to do architecture, but we think this is a really important aspect of designing and developing the relationship between the inside condition and the outside condition. So looking at the threshold between within a building and without a building in the landscape itself. So this term, students are asked to design a building within the city and within a very sensitive historical site, which is the Greyfriars site, and they're asked to design a building that will produce a particular product. So they're looking, some people are looking at apiaries producing honey, but the landscape associated with producing honey, looking at creating a kitchen where they're making food, but vegetables, growing vegetables associated with that, or herbal teas, etc. So they're looking at designing a landscape, and we're showing them precedents relating to designing those, looking at both hard landscaping and soft landscaping. So that's vegetables, herbs, shrubs and trees, etc., relating to that. One of the key buildings that we're asking, and landscapes we're asking them to look at, is Sissinghurst Castle. So looking at designing external rooms and architecture associated with that. Looking at designing microclimates, so they're associated with this, is an environment module. So working hand in hand with design and the environment, and issues that are associated with sustainability, which is becoming more and more a critical issue within the school. I'm going to pass you on to Chloe again, looking at stage 3.
Oh, sorry, this is the end of stage 2. Yes. So the second design module in stage 2 is called Collective Dwelling, which is actually run at the moment by Timothy Brittain-Catlin. In fact, him and his team won the Faculty Teaching Prize for this module last year on account of their innovative approach to teaching it. So they asked the students to produce a design code. So it's helping students to understand the local vernacular through drawing it. And then they develop a small repetitive housing scheme, which is an infill in a locality, and also includes some mixed-use elements. So it's about how you design to create a sense of community, and also how you design a home. So then we move on to stage 3. This slide is about artifacts specifically, but that is one option within the dissertation module. We discussed earlier that the dissertation module runs throughout stage 3. We actually introduce it at the end of stage 2, so that you have the summer to get running on it. So the summer at the end of stage 2, our students will be busy going off to the library, getting out lots of books, and starting to define their own topic, because you can decide to write your dissertation about anything you like, and it's the one moment we have in the BA which is very much student-led, and the brief is very open. And it's one of our strengths. The external examiners always praise the outputs of our dissertation and artifacts particularly. So our design projects in stage 3, we strive to base our design projects on live projects that are happening out and about in the Kent region. So we connect with local client bodies, usually councils or owners, operators of museums, etc. And we ascertain where there is a need for, say, they're putting in a funding application, and our students can actually help to create some kind of public support and awareness of a need for a facility, and to inspire, I suppose, more ambitious ideas for the client about what might be possible for their sites. So we've done projects actually based in Chatham Historic Dockyard the year previous to last, and that was a live project that was actually connected to the University of Kent, who are hoping to expand their Medway campus down there. Last year we based our final project on a slightly unusual aspect of the University of Kent that many people won't probably know about, but we do operate a small circus school in London. We validate their course, and the brief came out of the premise that we were going to extend that course and to provide a home for it in Margate. So this is a Centre for Circus Performing Arts. And I'm just showing projects here from 2 students, and I think these exemplify the fact that at the University of Kent we don't particularly ask students to pursue any agenda. We do encourage students to pursue their own path. So we have here a project by Benjamin Child, which is a very formal study of overlaid grids, channeling views and paths. And you'll see also that in stage 3 we integrate our design and technology. So this is an excerpt from the catalogue, and you can see that he's showing plans, sections, photographs of models, but also landscape elements, sky, sense of scale. So all of these aspects become integrated into your final project, and you'll see that our students are well versed by this point in executing professional presentations and layouts. So that's followed by this slide here, which you'll see is a different student's response to the same brief. This is Elida Elaine, and she has produced a much more fantastical notional project that's related to ideas about flight and arrival, and she's connecting those ideas to the theme of performance in relation to the circus arts brief. So 2 very different ways of exploring the same brief. We have 120 students in each year, but that's divided into across 2 days. So we have approximately 60 students being taught on each day, with 4 tutors leading each group. So these tutors will have been, students will have been taught by different tutors. We have 8 tutors in each year group, each teaching a set of about 15 students. So these are the excerpts from the final catalogue that's produced at the end of stage 3, and it goes for sale to students, parents. Sorry, I think students do have to buy it, unfortunately, but they also help produce it. And but also then we have prospective employers coming here to the final show, where these schemes are all exhibited, and that is a big opportunity for students to get recruited for their year-out positions. So move on to the next slide, which is about student support. We have a lot of support here at the University of Kent. Many of it, some of it is run by the university centrally, and some of it is run by our school. So we have academic peer mentoring scheme, which is relatively unusual, and that is a scheme whereby students from stages 3 and 4, so that's the M-Arch, will take on mentoring a student in stage 1, and we think that this has been proved to have benefits for both the stage 1 students who have connection with a student in later years, but also the stage 3 and 4 students have also described the fact that it's been confidence building for them, because it's a way of really understanding how much they know, without which they don't necessarily realise until they come to the point of trying to describe it to somebody who doesn't. So it brings cohesion between year groups and a strong sense of community. We also have the SLAS, which is the Student Learning Advisory Service. So that helps our students who have dyslexia and also dyspraxia. We have workshops in essay writing and mathematics. So it's an additional resource that sits outside the school that students can turn to for advice and guidance. Lots of our students, because it's a creative subject, do have dyslexia and often dyspraxia, and many people do actually get diagnosed on arrival as well. We run a course called Pedagogy, which is an elective of dissertation in stage 5, and pedagogy is about the study of education, and this is obviously about the study of architectural education in this context. And we have about 12 pedagogy students this year who teach in stage 1, and then they also develop teaching innovations and implement them in stage 1 as well. So that's a way of upping the quality of our teaching practice and being reflective about what architectural education is and what it should be, and also engaging our stage 5 students with our stage 1 students, and cross dissemination of ideas, and the whole school gets involved in the grips that are associated with the pedagogy module. We have a student experience manager called Ben Martin. He's the frontline support for all our students. So that's if they're intermitting or have illness or have inclusive learning plans, and they can get general support and advice from Ben, pastoral care, signposting, and he can also direct students to the appropriate university services, and he's been with the school for 11 years now. We also have a senior tutor, Dr. Richard Watkins, I should say. So he deals with more serious cases to do with plagiarism and appeals, but is also a source of support and information for students. And then we also have academic advisors, which is a university-wide initiative, but in the University of Kent, our academic advisors are also our stage coordinators. So each stage has a stage coordinator. We have Rebecca Hobbs running stage 1. We have Timothy Brittain-Catlin. Well, you ran stage 2 last year.
I did.
This year, Felicity at ECP has taken over his role on stage 2, and we have Dr. Ambrose Gillick, running stage 3 this year. And they are all your academic advisors, so you can go to them for advice about careers and employment and your future trajectory and anything else that might be concerning you. Next slide. So you've heard a little bit about the field trip in stage 1. We also run field trips for stages 2 and 3. We've been to all kinds of destinations over the years. A very memorable one I've been on was to Vienna. We went with our head of school and deputy head of school at that point, and it was snowing. It was a very beautiful experience. Lots of walking through the snow, looking at beautiful churches. So this year we are we're taking a pragmatic approach to our field trips in the face of climate change, something we're all very aware of, and we are embedding across the BA and MArch much more fundamentally. And hand in hand with that, we're not flying all our students off this year. We're going to go on the train. So we're taking the train to Brussels, and then we're going to do day trips to Antwerp and to Ghent. That will be fun for everybody. Next slide. We do have an internationalisation programme. So in the MArch, we offer a spring term in the university's Paris Centre. We also have a term abroad, so that's Erasmus in stage 2, and we also operate that in MArch as well. And we have a partnership with Kogakuin University in Tokyo, which we're expanding. So they come to us and integrate in the first part of our stage 3 every year, but we also are now sending students out to Kogakuin in Tokyo as well, as part of their MArch programme, and we're hoping to increase that association with BA as well. We have particular links at the University of Kent and KSAP with Rome, Lille, Venice, Istanbul and Virginia Tech, so lots of wide-reaching connections there that our students can become involved with. We have a very strong student association at the School of Architecture, and it's called CASA, which is Kent Architecture Student Association, and they are appointed, they are elected representatives. We have I think there are 8 representatives across the BA and MArch, and they run open lectures every 4 weeks. They also organise socials, workshops, and particularly they organise and curate themselves the end of year show and the catalogue for it. And then we have a series of open lectures. So we're always reaching out to practitioners and people who are doing important work out in the field of architecture in both theory and in practice, and we run an oscillating programme whereby each of our research centres, so we have 3 research centres, which are CASE, which is Centre for Architecture and the Sustainable Environment. We have CREATE, which is the Centre for Research in European Architecture, and we also have our new founded DARC, which is Digital Architecture and Research Centre. And each research centre is responsible for organising an open lecture every 4 weeks. And then the 4th open lecture, as you'll have seen in the slide before, is organised by CASA, our student association. So you'll see here we have had various important and eminent guests. The Richard Reed lecture was organised, for CREATE was organised by Timothy Brittain-Catlin, and that happened recently. We had Joseph Musil from Foster and Partners down recently for our, organised by the leader of DARC, who's our lecturer, Dr. Peter Boos. And our recent case lecture was organised by, we had a visiting lecturer, Susan Parham from the University of Hertfordshire, about urbanism. And our recent CASA lecture was an open lecture by Fred Hill.
Good for students.
Yes, so they happen every Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock and in our central lecture theatre here in the Marlow. We also, you might have seen on the aerial view of the campus that Tim showed. If you come here, you might notice that that differs a little from what's actually on the ground here at the University of Kent, because there's been a large programme of building activity taking place here. We've got a lot of new buildings. Obviously, when they're finally here, the students benefit enormously from that. While they're under construction, some people might think it's an inconvenience, but obviously for architecture students, this is a great opportunity, and we have organised lots of site visits around these buildings as they've been under construction. So we're showing here the Vidiger building, it's the new law building. It's built just a couple of years ago now. The extension to the Templeman Library by Penwar and Prasad Architects, and similarly the Simpson building by the same architects, Penwar and Prasad. So we've organised site visits to all of these. At the moment we have a new medical school under construction at the University of Kent, and we're organising site visits to that as well. It's currently under construction. Moving on to, oh sorry, I wasn't on the right slide. So these are our, at the top there is the Vidiger building by the law school, and at the bottom is the extension to the Templeman Library. And on the right hand side are some pictures of our students out and about on these site visits we've organised. So this is about employability. So where do you go when you leave Kent School of Architecture? Well, Tim has described all the various routes that you might take, but if you're going in the formal direction of pursuing a career in architecture, we have links with a whole host of architects both in London and locally, and we do often arrange connections. We get asked by these practices whether there are students we'd recommend for them, and we do help facilitate students to find suitable placements for them. Even though when you leave the Kent School of Architecture you are ostensibly separated at that point, and then you rejoin officially to pursue your M.Arch here. But we have links with Grimshaw Architects, with Farrell's, who are actually very involved in the Kent School of Architecture. Terry Farrell just came recently to do a workshop and talk here. HOK, HLM, Guy Holloway is the architect for this digital crit space here. He's based in both London but also on the Kent coast. On Architecture is a new local practice who are getting much more involved in the school. Plague Architecture, Jessica and Wiles in London. So you'll see here many opportunities that we have here for pursuing a career in architecture, and we can help you. These are examples of various practices students have gone to. And finally, here is the excerpt from our final page of the catalogue with some of our graduates from 2019. We very much hope you can join us, and one day this might be you. So I think that's the end of our presentation, and we look forward to hearing some of your questions.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. We've had some through so far. Thank you very much for sending those. Some as far as where's Hong Kong, which is fantastic. I'll just get into one which is proving quite popular actually, which is how many exams are there?
Good question. So we only have 2 exams in the BA. We have an exam that's run by Timothy Brittain-Catlin, which is...
Yes, we have 2 written exams in the old-fashioned sense, like an exam, like a school exam. But of course, we have assessments of other kinds so that you can see how you are proceeding with your design work. So there are exams, but not as you know it, we could say. The usual way in which architecture students are assessed, Kieran, is that they pin up their work on the board. Chloe's shown you plenty of examples of it, Rebecca did earlier. And then you will receive feedback from your tutors, and this happens in a formal way twice a year. So there are exams in that sense, and we also have exams in the form of technical exercises of various kinds, design exercises or practical exercises, some of them technical, technological, environmental, and so on. So there is examining going on, because if there wasn't, it wouldn't be a university. But it doesn't all look like the kind of exam that you might be used to. And of course, it's worth stressing that although there is an enormous variety of different types of practical, cultural, historical design study that you can do here, in fact your design work occupies roughly half your time, and half your marks, or more, slightly, I think. Slightly more. So that's the way in which students are assessed, generally speaking.
Those are crits. Those are called crits.
Yeah, they're called crits, yes.
So students stand up in front of their work and in front of 2 or more tutors and the rest of their cohort, and they describe their projects, and they get feedback on it, and that's what they're marked on. In terms of written exams, we only have 2 written exams, and one of them is 19th century.
One of them is 19th century architecture, yes.
And the other one is 20th century architecture. The following year. So stage 2 you have 1 exam, and stage 3 you have 1 exam.
Okay, there we go. Explains it all. Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Do keep the questions coming in throughout the rest of the programme. We'll be sure to answer them a bit later on. But firstly, here's a look at stage 2 of the architecture course.
In stage 2, we do a design module called Landscape. So it's mainly focused on looking at landscaping of a place, including, trees and plants.
And what we try and do is make students understand that, in this day and age, there is limited resource, that it's something important, and that you have to really think carefully about what you're using. And it's quite an important year because it lets you work out exactly what kind of architecture you want to be.
That then leads on in the autumn term to a project called Collective Dwelling, creating a sense of community and repetitive units as well, and domestic scale construction.
Housing is a big topic at the minute. It's coming back in the fall, there is not enough around, so this idea of designing one unit, whether it's a flat or a house, that can then be multiplied. I mean, what I'm promoting in second year, I suppose, is a humanist approach to design.
In fact, one of the things we've got, which really only the BA undergraduate students use, is our newly refashioned digital crit space. And here we've got 8 huge interactive screens, and students bring their work. And we also send students out for their year out in practice. We help students find this year out. If they haven't found one already, we get lots of offers from local and regional architects who come and see the students' final exhibitions, for instance, in June and July.
Our design projects in stage 3 are linked. So our first module is looking at existing buildings. So we run a module called Adapt and Extend, and we introduce them to the notion of conservation practice and working with existing drawings of buildings. We have links with quite a lot of local councils, and we like to base our final year project on a live project, so something that's actually going to happen.
So we're looking in that context at 2 buildings, the old Cliftonville Lido, derelict Lido, and also the Theatre Royal in Margate. And they're designing historical conservation in relation to the theatre and a new health facility in relation to the Cliftonville Lido. And most architecture students from Kent will find a job within the industry very quickly after graduation, because they will be trained to such a high level and competent in such a vast array of techniques, design techniques, computer software, technologies.
We're one of the few schools of architecture in a green campus university, so we're outside a lovely historic city of Canterbury and less than an hour away from central London by train, so that's quite a plus point.
I think coming here is really good because it really does expand your horizons. Not only are you studying in a different country, but it's, especially this course, I think it's a very international course. So you're also mixing with a lot of people from different parts of the world, different cultures with different architecture, but we're all coming together and we're studying the same thing here.
You do get to know the tutors and can go to them for advice, and that, I think that's what makes it special here, is that there's like a strong sense of community.
Stage 1, we have running a design project, a technical project, and folio. And folio runs through the whole year. And what you see here is the first 3 weeks of the year where they develop proposals based on Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities.
It describes a city called Zenobia, which are buildings on an arid landscape sitting on piles. So each building or each element is interconnected.
So initially I started off with a sketch of what I interpreted the city to be like. I'd done it on bamboo sticks because I thought that would create quite a dynamic composition and design. You have your own independent work, but then today it was sort of all our group would come together and we could also create the city as literally as everyone and create our final composition.
In the autumn term we have a design project based in Margate, and in the spring term we have they design a little exhibition centre that's based in the middle of Canterbury.
There is a real kind of focus on that creativity and fostering that, so that going into second and third year you can really inject your personality into your work.
You can sort of just still continue to push boundaries, but you're always, held by a foundation of logic and good technical understanding.
In stage 2, we do a design module called Landscape. So it's mainly focused on looking at landscaping of a place, including, trees and plants.
And what we try and do is make students understand that, in this day and age, there is limited resource, that it's something important, and that you have to really think carefully about what you're using. And it's quite an important year because it lets you work out exactly what kind of architecture you want to be.
That then leads on in the autumn term to a project called Collective Dwelling, creating a sense of community and repetitive units as well, and domestic scale construction.
Housing is a big topic at the minute. It's coming back in the fall, there is not enough around, so this idea of designing one unit, whether it's a flat or a house, that can then be multiplied. I mean, what I'm promoting in second year, I suppose, is a humanist approach to design.
In fact, one of the things we've got which really only the BA undergraduate students use is our newly refashioned digital crit space. And here we've got 8 huge interactive screens, and students bring their work. And we also send students out for their year out in practice. We help students find this year out. If they haven't found one already, we get lots of offers from local and regional architects who come and see the students' final exhibitions, for instance, in June and July.
Our design projects in stage 3 are linked. So our first module is looking at existing buildings. So we run a module called Adapt and Extend, and we introduce them to the notion of conservation practice and working with existing drawings of buildings. We have links with quite a lot of local councils, and we like to base our final year project on a live project, so something that's actually going to happen.
So we're looking in that context at 2 buildings, the old Cliftonville Lido, derelict Lido, and also the Theatre Royal in Margate. And they're designing historical conservation in relation to the theatre and a new health facility in relation to the Cliftonville Lido. And most architecture students from Kent will find a job within the industry very quickly after graduation, because they will be trained to such a high level and competent in such a vast array of techniques, design techniques, computer software, technologies.
We're one of the few schools of architecture in a green campus university, so we're outside a lovely historic city of Canterbury and less than an hour away from central London by train, so that's quite a plus point.
I think coming here is really good because it really does expand your horizons. Not only are you studying in a different country, but it's, especially this course, I think it's a very international course. So you're also mixing with a lot of people from different parts of the world, different cultures with different architecture, but we're all coming together and we're studying the same thing here.
You do get to know the tutors and can go to them for advice, and that, I think that's what makes it special here, is that there's like a strong sense of community.
Thank you very much for sending through your questions. Let's get stuck into some of those now. First one is there a desk per student in the studio?
We have a strong sense of studio culture. In stage 1, we have a studio space that has capacity for 60 students to operate at any one time, and we teach it across 2 days, so that each day that the students are in, they have their own desk, and the following day, when those students are being taught folio, the second cohort of students are assigned their own desk, and they're expected to be in the studio for the whole of that day, and the tutor will be going around and giving individual tutorials, but it is very much a sit down, be in the space, work on your project. And then stage 2 and stage 3, we operate between this room here, which is our digital crit space. So we have half of our, say, if we're going by year group, so stage 3, half of our year group will be taught in here on a Monday, while the other half are taught technology elsewhere, and then that's swapped again on a Tuesday. So it's the same kind of approach as stage 1, whereby the students are sitting here for the day and they're working on their projects with the tutor around, and the same thing happens on the day that they're taught technology, where they have active workshops where they're also sitting in the studio space next door being taught by their workshop leaders all together as a cohort as well. So yeah, there's a lot of studio activity and joined up thinking.
I suppose similar sort of question really, but are there computers, or would students need to bring their own device to lectures?
Well, we have in Studio B, we have about 60 computers, PCs set up, and then we also have a PC lab, which has another 35-ish computers. Aside from those, we do encourage students probably from stage 2 onward to purchase their own laptop, just for their own, I guess, ease of use, because then they can work wherever they like. They can work in the library, they can work at home. But our studios are open 24 hours, so everybody has access to a computer at any time. We have the computers linked to a digital screen, so that when you come into the studio space, you can see which computers are occupied at any one time. I don't think we've ever had a situation where all of the computers are being used, because there are so many students, for practical reasons, do buy their own device. And it is something we're hoping to move towards is to actually be a BYOD school, a bring your own device school, because we think that that's probably the best route for students in this day and age, to have control of their own devices and put the software that they want onto it, and we help students, support students with that as well. And in terms of computing in the studios, we do have 2 full-time technicians sitting in Studio B where the computers are, and they're available as front of house staff from 9 to 5 every single day to sort out any computer issues students have with either the computers in the studio or with their own devices.
And speaking of students, how many currently are there in first year at the moment?
How many students?
Yeah, sort of a rough amount, yeah.
Oh, we have about 119 this year.
And what sort of, I mean, kind of people asking, where do students generally come from? The majority from the UK. Have you got plenty of students from abroad at the moment?
I think about 30% of our students are from abroad, so from the EU and international. And we, in fact, in the first project, you might want to describe a bit more, Rebecca. In the first project in first year, we asked the students to come with a project that describes a little bit about themselves.
Yeah. So historically, we've asked them to look at different kinds of shelters, and obviously from different cultures, and we have a huge variety. I think this year we have about 25 different countries represented in stage 1. So there are many from Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Ghana, China, Thailand, Singapore, all sorts of other places. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, and people were asking a bit more about the lecturers and the teaching staff on the BA course. I know we touched upon it a little bit in the presentation, but let's just flesh out what are the lecturers, who they are, and what their roles are.
Shall I add a word on that, Kieran? We do have an enormous range of different types of expertise. I was saying right at the start that one of the great things about architecture is that you can take your qualification in any one of a number of different directions. And what that means is that architecture is full of all types of people. There are people who are very much attracted to the historical aspects of it, the conservation aspects of it, and likewise there are people who find the digital aspects of it important too. It's a very comprehensive kind of profession in any case. In any architectural practice you'll find people who do different things in different ways, and sometimes 2 or 3 people will work as an equal partnership where they all share in the same jobs, and sometimes you'll find that one person in particular likes the drawing and one likes the talking and one likes the researching and so on and so forth. So that's strongly reflected here in the architecture school. I could add a word about my own background. I am also the Deputy Chairman of the 20th Century Society. We are a national amenity society. We campaign for the protection of 20th century British buildings, but also for increasing awareness of them and education of them and research into them and so on. And that's my background. It means that I sit very happily in a school that has, for example, strong connections with the Canterbury Society. It was the Canterbury Society here in the city that invited Sir Terry Farrell to speak recently, just after he had given his masterclass with our visitors from Lille, as it happens at that time. So there is a strong aspect of that. Dr. Henrik Schoenfeld is working together with Houses of Parliament on the environmental design of the historic building, which of course is facing restoration and refurbishment at this present time. There are specialists in sustainable architecture and sustainable design. That means thermal comfort, lighting, heating, and so on is another essential aspect of it. We mentioned at the start the new Digital Architecture Research Centre. Dr. Tim Ireland is an expert in that. So you can see right away that there is a very wide range of different types of expertise which the school specialises in, and we are active too, writing and speaking and appearing and publishing and all the other bits and pieces that people who teach in universities generally do. And on top of that, there are architects who are primarily designer architects who spend their time creating buildings.
Okay, well, Timothy, thank you ever so much for that. So 3 of you, thank you as well for answering those questions. We'll have a bit more from the student perspective in a few moments' time, but firstly, here's the 3rd and final stage of our videos today.
Stage 1, we have running a design project, a technical project, and folio. And folio runs through the whole year. And what you see here is the first 3 weeks of the year where they develop proposals based on Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities.
It describes a city called Zenobia, which are buildings on an arid landscape sitting on piles. So each building or each element is interconnected.
So initially I started off with a sketch of what I interpreted the city to be like. I'd done it on bamboo sticks because I thought that would create quite a dynamic composition and design. You have your own independent work, but then today it was sort of all our group could come together and we could also create the city as literally as everyone and create our final composition.
In the autumn term we have a design project based in Margate, and in the spring term we have they design a little exhibition centre that's based in the middle of Canterbury.
There's a real kind of focus on that creativity and fostering that, so that going into second and third year you can really inject your personality into your work.
You can sort of just still continue to push boundaries, but you're always, held by a foundation of logic and good technical understanding.
In stage 2, we do a design module called Landscape. So it's mainly focused on looking at landscaping of a place, including, trees and plants.
And what we try and do is make students understand that, in this day and age, there is limited resource, that it's something important, and that you have to really think carefully about what you're using. And it's quite an important year because it lets you work out exactly what kind of architects you want to be.
That then leads on in the autumn term to a project called Collective Dwelling, creating a sense of community and repetitive units as well, and domestic scale construction.
Housing is a big topic at the minute. It's coming back in the fall, there is not enough around, so this idea of designing one unit, whether it's a flat or a house, that can then be multiplied. I mean, what I'm promoting in second year, I suppose, is a humanist approach to design.
In fact, one of the things we've got which really only the BA undergraduate students use is our newly refashioned digital crit space. And here we've got 8 huge interactive screens, and students bring their work. And we also send students out for their year out in practice. We help students find this year out if they haven't found one already. We get lots of offers from local and regional architects who come and see the students' final exhibitions, for instance, in June and July.
Our design projects in stage 3 are linked. So our first module is looking at existing buildings. So we run a module called Adapt and Extend, and we introduce them to the notion of conservation practice and working with existing drawings of buildings. We have links with quite a lot of local councils, and we like to base our final year project on a live project, so something that's actually going to happen.
So we're looking in that context at 2 buildings, the old Cliftonville Lido, derelict Lido, and also the Theatre Royal in Margate. And they're designing historical conservation in relation to the theatre and a new health facility in relation to the Cliftonville Lido. And most architecture students from Kent will find a job within the industry very quickly after graduation, because they will be trained to such a high level and competent in such a vast array of techniques, design techniques, computer software, technologies.
We're one of the few schools of architecture in a green campus university, so we're outside a lovely historic city of Canterbury, and less than an hour away from central London by train, so that's quite a plus point.
I think coming here is really good because it really does expand your horizons. Not only are you studying in a different country, but it's, especially this course, I think it's a very international course. So you're also mixing with a lot of people from different parts of the world, different cultures with different architecture, but we're all coming together and we're studying the same thing here.
If you do get to know the tutors and can go to them for advice, and that, I think that's what makes it special here, is that there's like a strong sense of community.
Okay, I've got a couple of students. I've got Ethan and Josie alongside myself and Chloe now. Ethan, I'll come to you first. Just give us an idea of what it's like to be an architecture student here at the University of Kent.
Being a student in architecture especially is quite a unique experience, as there's a lot of studio culture, in a sense that we do a lot of like group projects together, unlike most other courses. So you get very close with a lot of your peers and friends, and you can also talk to each stage as you're spending a lot of time in the studio working together and doing a lot of group projects. So that's a really good thing and really unique to architecture, and it's just a great sense of community working together.
And we've also had a question in saying, is architecture what you thought it would be like at the start? Give us an idea about that.
Yes, so architecture is very much what I expected it to be. I did quite a lot of research before I came here, and I would say it very much lived up to expectations. It's quite an intense course, but something that I really enjoy doing. So, yeah.
And Ethan, what about Canterbury in general? For people who as I mentioned earlier, got people watching from Hong Kong. They're going to come over to Canterbury. What would you say to them about encouraging them to come?
Canterbury itself is a really beautiful city. It's not a massive city, which is actually a benefit, as you can get around really easily. It's close to the campus. There's lots of shops, restaurants, and it's just a very safe city as well, as it's, as I said, walkable to campus. Accommodation is very close and it's very accessible to get around, so it's a very nice city to live in.
Okay, perfect. And Chloe, I think, what would you say to prospective students about coming here and about the student experience? So we're going to hand round this microphone here.
Thank you. I'd say the location of the University of Kent is one of our big assets. So we're close to the city centre, but we're separate from it, and we look out across it. I think we do benefit from the walk that our students are required to take up the hill. So they get a good 20-minute workout on their way to lectures in the morning, which is blows away all our cobwebs. But the city centre itself is pedestrianised, and it's full of active street life, and it's very much a place that we encourage our students to inhabit and draw and sketch, and we take them down to the city centre as part of our folio course, get them to look around all the buildings and enjoy the heritage. It's a UNESCO heritage site. Did I mention that? Yes.
Yeah, we're going to have to do a bit of pass with the microphone, I'm afraid. And just give us an idea as well about the accommodation here at Canterbury. I mean, you mentioned such a beautiful historic place. Is it that to live? Talk us through the accommodation.
Yeah, so there's lots of variety in the accommodation that you can live in. In first year, you're very likely to be campus-based, and you can choose between houses and flats with lots of different varying numbers of people. I really enjoyed living on campus. It was really, really easy to get here. I had about a 10-minute walk from my accommodation to campus, and it wasn't challenging at all. It was a lovely walk through the trees. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then all the other people that I've spoken to living even closer than we all found it a great place to live. And then in second and third year, it's really easy to find housing. There's anything that you want, you can find. So yeah.
Super, thank you very much, Ethan. I'll come to you next. Just talk us through what site your project is based on and what it's about.
So currently our site is based in Canterbury at Greyfriars, and it's quite good that a lot of our projects are always based locally or try to be in Canterbury. So I mean, you can access it quite regularly, go into town, and sort of just like makes you learn a bit more about where you're living and like the area of Canterbury itself. So I think that's a really good place to have a project.
And just finally, obviously, you've been in the position which people at home will be watching at the moment, where they're thinking about going to various places. What would be the top things that you would say to them to persuade them to come to the architecture school here at the University of Kent?
I'd say one thing is definitely Canterbury itself. As I said, it's a really wonderful place to live. The course, you see your tutors all the time, your friends are always with you, and we're a very close-knit community. I think the community is one of the most essential parts of this course, and especially in Kent itself is a very valuable thing that we have together.
Okay, well, that's just about it. We've had plenty of questions. Thanks to everyone for sending their questions in. Thanks to the three. Thanks to all of our guests for their presentations as well. And as I say, that's just about it for today. But we've got one more video which we're going to show for you. So we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Stage 1, we have running a design project, a technical project, and folio. And folio runs through the whole year. And what you see here is the first 3 weeks of the year where they develop proposals based on Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities.
It describes a city called Zenobia, which are buildings on an arid landscape sitting on piles. So each building or each element is interconnected.
So initially I started off with a sketch of what I interpreted the city to be like. I'd done it on bamboo sticks because I thought that would create quite a dynamic composition and design. You have your own independent work, but then today it was sort of all our group could come together and we could also create the city as literally as everyone and create our final composition.
In the autumn term, we have a design project based in Margate, and in the spring term we have they design a little exhibition centre that's based in the middle of Canterbury.
There's a real kind of focus on that creativity and fostering that, so that going into second and third year you can really inject your personality into your work.
You can sort of just still continue to push boundaries, but you're always, held by a foundation of logic and good technical understanding.
In stage 2, we do a design module called Landscape. So it's mainly focused on looking at landscaping of a place, including, trees and plants.
And what we try and do is make students understand that, in this day and age, there is limited resource, that it's something important, and that you have to really think carefully about what you're using. And it's quite an important year because it lets you work out exactly what kind of architecture you want to be.
That then leads on in the autumn term to a project called Collective Dwelling, creating a sense of community and repetitive units as well, and domestic scale construction.
Housing is a big topic at the minute. It's coming back in the fall, there is not enough around, so this idea of designing one unit, whether it's a flat or a house, that can then be multiplied. I mean, what I'm promoting in second year, I suppose, is a humanist approach to design.
In fact, one of the things we've got which really only the BA undergraduate students use is our newly refashioned digital crit space. And here we've got 8 huge interactive screens, and students bring their work. And we also send students out for their year out in practice. We help students find this year out. If they haven't found one already, we get lots of offers from local and regional architects who come and see the students' final exhibitions, for instance, in June and July.
Our design projects in stage 3 are linked. So our first module is looking at existing buildings. So we run a module called Adapt and Extend, and we introduce them to the notion of conservation practice and working with existing drawings of buildings. We have links with quite a lot of local councils, and we like to base our final year project on a live project, so something that's actually going to happen.
So we're looking in that context at 2 buildings, the old Cliftonville Lido, derelict Lido, and also the Theatre Royal in Margate. And they're designing historical conservation in relation to the theatre and a new health facility in relation to the Cliftonville Lido. And most architecture students from Kent will find a job within the industry very quickly after graduation, because they will be trained to such a high level and competent in such a vast array of techniques, design techniques, computer software, technologies.
We're one of the few schools of architecture in a green campus university, so we're outside a lovely historic city of Canterbury and less than an hour away from central London by train, so that's quite a plus point.
I think coming here is really good because it really does expand your horizons. Not only are you studying in a different country, but it's especially this course, I think it's a very international course. So you're also mixing with a lot of people from different parts of the world, different cultures with different architecture, but we're all coming together and we're studying the same thing here.
If you do get to know the tutors and can go to them for advice, and that, I think that's what makes it special here, is that there's like a strong sense of community.